far in the West Highlands, situated right on the border between North and South Morar. There sits a huge mound of labyrinthian boulders, a place which strikes terror into the heart of any wise man. At the base of the mound, there sits a secluded rocky path that transports one over the river and to the north side of the loch. But very seldom is this path taken, for it is said to be haunted by the most violent and hideous creature. No one who has ventured through the path during the midnight hours has ever returned to tell the tale. Those brave or foolish enough to attempt this task are commonly found the next morning, mangled and strewn upon the sharp boulders, bearing all the telltale signs of a grisly and unnatural death. Whispers among the locals have always told of the headless beast of Morar. The knowledgeable men and women of Morar, or in fact any who passed through and possessed the second sight, would tell of haunting visions surrounding the rocky mound. There a phantom was said to live, a beast which took the form of a giant hulking headless man, naked as the day it spawned, yet covered in thick dark bristly hair. This creature became known to the locals as the Colann, or the headless body. It was said to be a savage primal creature, with no one quite knowing what it was or where it came from, only that the rocky path was its home, and those found there after the fall of night would never return. Now this horrifying beast was a particular problem for a man known as Macdonald of South Morar. He and his family lived very near the rocky path, and had much need to traverse it. It was after all the simplest route to the north, and one of the only ways the family could go into town for supplies. The Macdonalds had been safe for many years, as the father would only allow travel during the day, and never let the children out to play by the rocks. But this fragile safety was to completely shatter on one cold night. Deep into the harsh Scottish winter, the home of Macdonald was visited by an unexpected guest, an old soldier and brother-in-arms to Macdonald. The pair were happy to meet, and quickly Donald produced whiskey and food. They were to celebrate such a reunion, but what a shame it would be if the other men of the company could not also join in the revelries. Macdonald, somewhat weary of the diminishing light, called upon his only son and heir. A brave and powerful young man soon appeared by his father. Macdonald told him to run with the greatest of haste through the rocky path and onward to Bracara, and invite the old soldiers to join him and his guest in celebration. But the young man would have to be quick. Darkness was already upon the horizon, and soon the headless body would prowl the path. If his son could not return with the men before night fell, he was under strict instructions not to return at all, and instead find shelter and safety till the morning. The son happily accepted his father's charge, and was soon sprinting through the winding rocky path. He made it past the mound and over the river while the light still remained. Soon he was on the outskirts of Bracara and began banging upon doors. But every house that the young man went to had the same story. The man of the house had gone off down to the loch on a hunting trip. Young Macdonald did not want to fail his father, and so ran further. He would go to the loch and find the men, but by the time he arrived, all the boats had already left. Now completely despondent, he began the long road home. Eventually, the boy would reach the rocky path, but due to his detour and his slower pace returning, he arrived there in the bleak darkness of night. He remembered what his father told him, but with a foolish determination that goes hand in hand with youth, the son decided that he would enter the path and return to his home. The elder Macdonald and his friend drank late into the night. They assumed that the young man did not have the necessary speed to return, or had been slowed by the aging soldiers, as neither the son nor the friends ever arrived. On the next morning, Macdonald guided his friend through the rocky path. all to say farewell and to locate his son. But as they neared the exit, the pair came across a horrific sight. A great struggle had occurred. Rocks and boulders had been uplifted and scattered across the path, and speckled between them was the blood and torn remains of Macdonald's only son and heir. The man collapsed upon the ground, his hands and feet covered in the very lifeblood of his beloved son. Then, in a great rage, the proud Macdonald stood and declared a solemn vow that he would neither eat nor drink till the life of his son was avenged. That night he would hunt and kill the dreaded beast who lurked in the stone mound. Now upon that very same afternoon, the men from Bracara would return home and learn about the tragic fate of their friend's son. They all set off quickly to Macdonald's house, and there found the man in full battle dress, sharpening both his claymore and dirk. All of the former warriors pleaded with Macdonald. They begged him not to venture out that night, and attempted to console the grieving father. But nothing could now extinguish the raging fire that was within Macdonald. As evening approached, he told the men to stay within his house, and not to follow him, no matter what happened. This fight was to be his, and his alone. The man walked down the rocky path, and called on the beast to come forth and meet its death. It was then the shadows by his right side began to move, and the horrible, hair-covered creature emerged. There was no eyes to lock, just the unsettling and disjointed movements of the headless creature. Then a wicked sound emanated from the darkness.
"You have come for your son's payment. Take counsel, old man, and go home now."
At this the warrior merely smirked, and lunged forward with his claymore, striking at the very heart of the beast. A great battle then ensued, lit only by the occasional sparks of steel upon stone. The beast dodged a final swing from the warrior, and with a huge club-like fist it battered the sword from Macdonald's hand. But at this the crazed Scotsman leapt upon the beast and began a furious struggle. At last Macdonald threw the headless beast to the ground and drew his sharpened dirk. Suddenly the voice returned, but this time far more frantic.
"Hold your hand, Macdonald, and touch me not with that foul iron. If you spare me, I will never again be seen where there is one within 20th degree related to you in Morar."
There was a brief silence in the cold dark night, and then Macdonald sheathed his dagger and returned home, leaving the once mighty, headless beast of Morar a lowly, wretched shadow of its former self. The brave warrior had won his battle, and displayed more honour and elegance than such a beast ever could. The creature's death would not return the man's son, and in sparing the beast its life, Macdonald damned it to a worse fate than death, eternity. Never again would the headless beast be seen in Morar, and never again would it return to haunt the rocky path. Still to this very day, there has been no sighting of the terrible creature, and when this tale was first published, alongside it was a note that recorded the two surviving blood relatives of the warrior, an old man in Morar and a poor woman in Fort William. But that was over 100 years ago, and no one knows if the man's blood still lives on. Perhaps any day now, the name of Macdonald will appear in the obituaries of a local paper for the last time, and in that very day, the beast will return from the shadows and be released upon an unsuspecting world once more. Thank you for listening, and a special thank you to my wonderful patrons who help me keep these tales alive. This is of course not the only tale of the headless beast, but it does seem to be the first and oldest recollection. There's another popular version told by Alistair MacGregor, in which Morar is haunted by a headless creature known as Colann the Headless, which seems to be a misunderstanding of the original tale, or a mistake when hearing the tale in Gaelic, as the creature's Gaelic name is Colann gan Cheann, which means body with no head, whereas Colann the Headless seems to infer that this specific malefic creature was and still is named Colann. Either way, this Colann snares and kills travellers as they pass through Morar, yet it is told that the creature is deathly afraid of sunlight, and this is why all the missing people have disappeared during the night. It is then that one Ian MacLeod becomes determined to rid the path of the wicked spectre. He heads there one evening and is soon met by Colann, and the pair begin to wrestle. They battle for so long that dawn begins to rise, and as it does, MacLeod pins Colann to the ground, where the headless beast screams out for mercy, and that it will not survive the coming sunlight. MacLeod demands that the creature swear upon the Bible and the 7 candles never to return, something Colann seems more than happy to do. The creature is then banished to deep within the heart of a mountain lying in the Isle of Skye, where it is said it will remain forevermore. Personally, I don't like this version near as much as the original. Perhaps it is only that I cannot get over this unimaginable horror being called Colann. But it also seems a little less interesting, and dare I say less magical than the former. One aspect I find interesting about the original tale is that the strange beast still remains a mystery to this very day, with some claiming it to be a nightmarish cryptid, while others suggest a paranormal spectre. But to me, I think the answer lies somewhere in the middle. The spiritual description of the creature, and its raw strength and headless abnormality, seems to fit with some form of old malefic sidhe or fairy. For starters, it lives in a large rocky mound, where all fae creatures come from, and where we get the phrase Doine Sidhe, or folk of the fairy mound. Then its thick, hairy appearance gives it something in common with the Urisk, or some Bogles or Bochans. But where the real evidence sits is the beast's abject terror of iron. It has long been known that the sidhe fear iron, as it happens to be one of the only known substances to harm, or in some tales even kill, the fae. This belief is so ancient in Scotland that some historians have even suggested that the iron bands worn by the Pictish warriors may have been a method of warding off just such an evil spirit. Now, if you have any knowledge of Irish folklore, or the Irish language, or Gaelic, then I am sure you have been waiting for me to mention the glaring connection between our headless beast of Morar and the Dullahan, or the so-called Headless Horseman, an Irish being of folklore and legend. The Dullahan is said to ride a great black horse and carry its own head beneath an arm. It is said to appear as an omen of death, or in many cases as the very reaper itself. But the Irish word Dullahan refers to a kind of general hobgoblin or evil spirits, and more often the specific headless form from legend was called Colann gan Cheann, a body with no head, often shortened to just gan Cheann. This seems to suggest that our creature has a strong connection to the original Irish legends, especially as the tale comes from the West Highlands, where the Gaels first entered our land and made their home. So it is my suggestion that the myths of the Dullahan became interwoven with Pictish folklore and superstitions, giving rise to what we now know as the Headless Beast of Morar. I hope you all enjoyed this tale, and if I were you, I wouldn't go wandering around Morar at night. Slàinte mhath.